Ladies and gentlemen, before the main event takes place, we are all gathered here to witness something truly historic. After eons of fighting for equality, and even in the recent decades, competing on the wrestling mat and competing for equal pay, just fighting, scratching and clawing, doing what they could to get recognized, not just for being women, but for being talented and uber athletes. We now get to witness women take center stage live on pay-per-view. So, for the thousands in attendance and the millions watching at home, let's get ready to witness a boxing match. First, fighting out of the red corner from Itman, West Virginia. She's the coal miner's daughter, Christy Martin, played by Sydney Sweeney, who I have seen on the big screen across numerous genres over the past few years, and I can safely say that while I've still never seen her wrestle, I've seen her box. Christy comes to us from Black Bears Pictures and writer-director David Machado, who did War Machine, not the tag team War Machine. He did a movie called War Machine. He could have done the tag team War Machine. I'm not necessarily here to judge. Maybe the movie War Machine was inspired by the tag team War Machine. If you're not a wrestling fan, you are so goddamn confused. But this was also written by Mariah Fox, who was Wendy in The Gift and has been involved on screen and behind the scenes with other projects. And the story was done by Catherine Fugaiti, don't actually know. She wrote Valentine's Day and New Year's Eve, and features Sydney Sweeney herself. You know, the one that has great genes. The one that certainly always has that washed away look, like she, is waiting for her fucking bus. Okay, like, my opinion of Sydney Sweeney has been well known. I have yet to see anything that she has done where I'm like, okay, I get it. I get why people like her as an actress. I mean, Madam Web was a wash. That was Dakota Johnson's fault, and also the fault of the fact that the movie was, as bad as it was. But Immaculate, she was decent in that. Americana was a movie that exists. There are other ones I've seen over the last few years. I don't think she's bad. I just don't think she's as great as some people say. I think a lot of people think she's great because she has large upper frontal protuberances. But that being said, Sydney Sweeney has said in interviews that she put in the work to play boxer Christy Martin. Christy Slayer / Martin. She was known as Christy Martin. She rose to prominence in the 90s, still fought into the 2000s, and this is her story. Bum bum. Sydney says she gained quite a bit of muscle. She was uber strong and stuff like that. And as far as the boxing scenes go with this, I will say you can tell that she put in the work, and they were well shot. They were, decently done. This also, basically doesn't tell her from her infancy all the way to, her adult life. By the way, Christy is still alive, just in case you're wondering. That's not necessarily a spoiler. You could just look that up. But this received quite a bit of attention on the film festival circuit, especially for Sydney Sweeney's performance. Now, after I mentioned stuff about her putting in the work and everything, we have other people in this particular production. We have Ben Foster as Jim Martin. Ben Foster has certainly had quite the career. He's a pretty good actor. He's a pretty slimy individual here, I'll say that much. We have Jessica Gabor as Rosie. We have Ethan Embry, of all people, in this. We have Katie O'Brien as Lisa, who factors into something a little bit later on. We have Chad Coleman as Don King, that was pretty goddamn hilarious, especially for 90s boxing fans like myself, 80s and 90s boxing fans. Don't get me wrong, I still appreciate what boxing is, but boxing is so, just niche now. Even if they draw big crowds, it's usually in foreign countries, not always here. I mean, I know they've drawn some here. The whole point is it's not even like the days of, Foreman coming back and stuff like that. But Christy Martin basically broke the mold as far as how other women could come up in boxing. We do get to see a brief appearance from Layla Ali. Well, somebody playing Layla Ali. And also, you could imagine a Ronda Rousey probably, to an extent, might have been inspired by Christy Martin. And maybe not necessarily by, her lifestyle, and you don't have to really try hard to read up on that. Christy, fun fact, did actually box Holly Holm, yes, before Holly got into UFC and went back to boxing because she got her brains beaten in. But we do have we do get some stuff about the family life. I will say that Merritt Weber, you are gonna hate her. You're gonna hate her in this. Jesus. She wasn't in it that often, but when she was, oh, I've known people like that. I know people like this, and oh, Jesus Christ. Good on her, though. Good on her. Now, Sydney obviously is the main focus. Her and her relationship with Jim. And from there, we basically get a boxing movie, kind of in the vein of The Fire Inside, but also, kind of like Million Dollar Baby. Except this is more like $250,000 baby because it basically has a checklist, a bingo card, so to speak, with the free space. Oh, I figured out where this thing was going to go pretty quickly. Now, look, it's based on a true-to-life thing, so, and a real-life person, so obviously there's going to be liberties taken with some stuff, and you can't tell everything in a 2+ hour movie, and that's actually the biggest thing. There are parts that are rushed in this movie, and there are parts that are stretched out, but it has issues because Sydney puts in the work and there's other effort here, but it also despite the gritty attempts, and some scenes that probably are going to make some people uncomfortable. If you are not a fan of certain assault, you're probably not going to like certain things in this, but I'd promise read up a little bit on Christy and you'll, you won't be spoiled, but you'll at least be prepared. But Sydney displays some acting chops here, but I still don't get it. She's all right. She is at least given a little bit of a meatier role to sink her teeth into. But at least Katie O'Brien was in this. I'm always happy to see Katie O'Brien featured. Just because I've loved her since Love Lies Bleeding, which I know just is not even like 2 years old as far as, its release date. But she's been busy and she's very charismatic, physically impressive. I'm glad she got at least a somewhat supporting role in this. There were a few needle drops of music and stuff like that, and it was not necessarily a movie that grabbed me. It kept me at arm's length, which is kind of smart because when you're boxing, you don't want somebody to be any closer than arm's length or they'll punch you in the fucking face. Boxing scenes are decent. There are moments where it feels like it's coming alive, but The Fire Inside to me was a little bit too streamlined and glossy. And even though Ryan Destiny did a pretty good job, I think this is a little bit better. But at the same time, while that movie was short and skipped over quite a few things, this is longer, but we focus on a little bit of her in the beginning, doing tough man stuff, getting discovered in boxing, getting better. 1995, 2003, and 2010 are the focal years. And she did a massive 49-7 record with 31 wins via knockout and was active from 1989 to 2012. And given what happened in the last couple of years of her active career, it's actually a miracle that, one, she got to box again, and two, she's still here. So it is going to be in theaters, I think, in about a week. I think it's getting released in the beginning of November. So I'm going to get into spoilers. What little there is. 3, 2, 1, spoilers. So there we go. Basically, her mother, and basically her parents are very, very religious. Christy's gay. Has a relationship with a girl named Rosie, Jessica Bohr, who, kind of, she needs to be sent to a priest to have the gay prayed away. They don't say that verbiage, but it basically is. And again, Joyce, the mother, oh God, you just would like Christy to deck her. She plays her role great. It's just that bitch. I'm sorry. If you were going to let religion dictate how you feel about your children, should your children turn out gay, should they actually be gay and you just don't want to admit it, you're a fucking lousy parent. You don't deserve to have kids. But, Christy did, work hard. She never had dreams of being a boxer and everything, but she knew she was tough. And basically, this is like if Queen of the Ring was better. At least this goes for a little bit of the grit and doesn't feel like it's trying to, cut down on the bad shit that happened in the story. Also, I think David is probably a little more progressive and not as shit of an individual as Ash Avildsen. Read up on his opinions on certain things. And also the fact he melted down because Queen of the Ring didn't do that well in theaters. It wasn't very fucking good. But essentially, she ends up meeting a guy named Larry Carrier. She does some boxing, like almost in a carnival, going back to territorial wrestling days and territorial boxing days. And then she ends up beating a woman pretty well, even though, she's getting hit. She's, doing some good stuff. She ends up meeting Jim, and Ben's just perfectly creepy and paunchy and just disgusting in this. And I will say, skipping ahead a little bit, Jim basically ends up using her as basically an ATM and stuff like that, funneling money from her purses into his lavish lifestyle. She does end up getting hooked on cocaine later in the movie. That's not totally featured, but that's an addiction she had to kick. While she is training, she is given a trailer to live in with a little dog that we don't see the dog after a bit, but then again, I have to assume that the dog eventually did die because, little dog, and also dogs don't live forever, as much as we wish our pets lived forever. So basically, she's living there. Eventually, Rosie is basically talking to her and says, look, this isn't going to work. I met a guy and stuff like that. And so, goodbye, that kind of stuff. And so, naturally, Christy's a little upset. She's also kind of sleeping with Jim, so you kind of think she's doing it out of convenience. She does end up marrying him because he basically begs her to, because she's his meal ticket. And she ends up basically, 1995 is where things really start to explode. This kind of actually reminds me of a mix of the Queen of the Ring and the Smashing Machine, if those movies were better. Because this isn't great, don't get me wrong, it's very standard, but this at least has a little bit of life to it. Neither of those movies did. But basically, her rise, she continues to have fights with Jim because he's not really willing to put in the work, but he's doing the train and stuff like that, but he wants her to do all the work. But no, you need to train. You don't need other jobs. He's controlling her life. Later when she gets a cell phone, a BlackBerry, she's controlling him. Or he's controlling her. Every move, all this stuff and like that. She should have been controlling him. Should have been beating the shit out of him, as far as I'm concerned. But that being said, meanwhile, her family, especially her mother, is just totally wrapped around Jim's finger. He can make her believe anything because she's just happy that her daughter basically was able to get away from being gay and marry a guy. And that's like the most disgusting thing about it. So they end up owning a gym together. She's doing some sparring and stuff like that and getting ready for fights. There is a nice earlier scene where she's supposed to, be beaten out of the ring and stuff like that. And one guy even gives her like a shot in the ribs. But then she ends up knocking the guy out, which leads to a funny moment. That's kind of a funny moment. But 1995, there's Tyson and Bruno. And, that was in 96 actually. But, Tyson, we all know how he felt about women. If you don't know, read up on Mike Tyson. Tremendous power boxer and one of the most entertaining of his time, but a fucking piece of shit. No wonder Vince got along with him. But that being said, 1995, she's doing good. She wrestles on the undercard of that. She ends up going the distance, going for speed, gets a decision win against a fellow fighter, and is doing well. She gets on the cover of Sports Illustrated. Gets her own custom-made pink BMW because she's always wearing pink. And then she would actually go on a string of 8 more wins. She would even fight on the undercard of Tyson and Holyfield, where everybody got an earful, especially Tyson. But then, Chad Coleman shows up as Don King. That was actually kind of fun. And he was actually pretty good, even though he was really only featured in like a couple scenes. He made the most of it. So she ends up going on a streak of a bunch of wins. You can look this stuff up on Google, by the way. She does suffer a loss sometime in 1998, but keeps going. Has 9 more victories after that. But things are starting to slow down because, she was born in 68. So now she's 35. We get to 2003, and she's going to face Layla Ali, who for a period was actually pretty goddamn dominant because Muhammad Ali's daughter, she's even half as good as him. People are fucked. But, Christy's working hard and thinking that she can do it. Lisa shows up, and Lisa, by the way, does end up becoming her future wife. And the turmoil with Jim is continuing. Lisa's brought in to help train, do this kind of stuff. There's obvious chemistry. And then basically she ends up getting just smoked by Layla Ali. I mean, just destroyed. It was a good bring down, and her fights started getting more sporadic. Due in large part to the fact that even though she was still good, I mean, she hadn't suffered that many losses, she still was, she was almost seen as old news. Like, she broke the mold, she got some money, which Jim has been basically taking, and funneling for his own stuff. But that doesn't end up really doing anything to derail her until the fights start getting more sporadic. Then infighting starts going on. There were injuries to other boxers that would delay fights. She would, get into the cocaine, that kind of stuff. And also, basically, Jim was controlling her to the point that, they were filming some bad stuff, taking pictures. Smut, shall we say. And kind of using his blackmail against her. He controls her cell phone. And talking about, having this one big fight, but she needs his purse money because she's thinking about leaving him. And the mother's even like, no, you're not going to leave him or whatever. He tells me that you're into the cocaine, you're into some drugs, and I just think you sound paranoid and crazy and everything. And again, the character of Joyce, great. Just great. You just want Christy to deck her. Meanwhile, by the way, some of these scenes are moving at a glacial pace. Like, this movie, again, is really too long. But we're in 2010, by the way. Things are finally fully unraveling with Jim. She ends up coming into contact with Rosie. I believe her actual ex was named Sherry, but whatever. Meets her at a restaurant. Jim's tracking her every move. She decided she was going to leave him. She spends some time with Rosie in a hotel. And then finally decides, you know what, I'm tired of running, I'm going to go back. And everything seems cool. She takes a drink, she gets a glass of water, goes to sleep, and is on the phone with Rosie, hangs up the phone, and then Ben Foster, but Jim proceeds to basically stab her 5, 6 times, maybe 7, in the gut, or in the sides, and one even on the leg, filleting some of her skin, stabbing her like an owl. And even pulls out a gun and shoots her. And then takes a shower and is like, okay, this kind of stuff. Now, she even manages to rise up, back on her feet, get up, basically, get some keys, goes to, unlock her car. She grabbed his keys, and then gets to the goddamn, gets to the road. A guy picks her up. She goes to the hospital, apologizes for bleeding on the guy's seats. Gets to the hospital. Rosie's there because she remembered Rosie's number. Rosie told her to do that, and she gives that, and Rosie's there, and then the mother shows up and basically like, this is all your fault, this kind of stuff. And then Christy wakes up and basically says, I'm sorry I'm not the dart you want me to be and everything, but basically just reads her the riot act. Which, good. All religious parents like that deserve a cold hard slap of reality. Because if you buy into that much of a storybook, which it is, any version of the Bible, any holy book, is a storybook. And if you don't fucking agree with that, I don't fucking care. But she basically reads her the riot act. The dad may be religious, but the dad is much more understanding. The brother is trying to basically do this, and the mother is so caught into just in the goddamn weeds when it comes to this stuff that she can't admit that she's the problem. Now, I'm not saying that Christy was necessarily totally innocent. She knocked a lot of women, her opponents in promos, basically calling them slurs, gay slurs and everything that I'm not really going to get into. But then basically Christy decides, you know what, I'm going to get back in the ring. Now she also, Lisa comes to visit her. So we don't see Rosie again. But she visits, she's visited by Lisa. Lisa talks to her. And it's obvious that certain bits of chemistry are going on. Even before their fight, because they did fight before. She wished her good luck. She wishes her good luck here. And then Christy shows back up at the gym, wants to get back in the ring. Eventually does get back in the ring for like a couple more fights. I don't think she fought that much more. She could not achieve her 50th win. Again, the aforementioned 49-7 record. But still, a hell of a goddamn record. I mean, it's pretty goddamn impressive. And then the movie just goes over some facts and stuff like that. Jim did die in prison. Good. There was a court scene also where she's reading, like, what he did to her and stuff like that. But the movie, I don't know. The movie just kind of is a little bit inconsistent with its tone. And I'm not saying, like, they shouldn't have gone for the darker stuff. I'm glad they did. But there were just parts that just clicked. There were parts that didn't. And again, Sydney, I'm still not quite, I'm not on board. This is not a bad role for her. But Oscar consideration, please. Please, watch her actually get an Oscar nomination for this. Even though there have been way better, jobs done this year. So, Rose Byrne better get one for If I Had Legs, I'd Kick You. Go watch that instead of this. So, C+. I mean, it's just above average, but that's really it. So, agree, disagree with what I said? Like, share, subscribe. Twitter, Letterboxd, Blue Sky handles in the description. I'm John Ritland. Until we box, West Virginia mother again. Probably should have workshopped that. Probably shouldn't do that. Only do that if you're the daughter and your mother is so religious. Just, I don't know, kill them with kindness. Also, don't bother to try and stab your spouse if they haven't done anything wrong. I don't know what this outro is. So anyway, I'm John Ritland, and I'll see you soon.